Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to welcome you to a hopeful post-July 4th weekend celebration, that everybody had a good holiday. I took time off on Friday to watch Hamilton, which I hope many of you did as well. My name is Alan Smason, and this indeed is NOLA Theatre Talk. We're gathering tonight for a very special conversation with one of New Orleans's most noted playwrights and someone who has had an impact on theater here in New Orleans. We're broadcasting, of course, to our NOLA Theatre Folk Facebook group. And again, if you want to join, we ask that you essentially ask, there's some questions that have to be asked, and just determine that you're not a person from Malaysia or whatever trying to infiltrate our group, that you have some connection to New Orleans and theater. And if you answer those questions, we hopefully get you inside the group, and you'll be able to be part of our community. We want to thank you all who have already done so. But again, if anybody wants to become a member, we're happy to do some outreach right now. Also, we broadcast to theatercriticism.com's Facebook page, and also my own Facebook portrait, if you will, profile, and as well as my YouTube channel, which you can find by just looking at my name on YouTube. Tonight, we have the great pleasure to be in the room, as it were, where it happens, with, as I said, a very eminent playwright, somebody who's been responsible for helping one of our main theaters in New Orleans get founded, and that, of course, being Southern Rep. We'll talk a little bit about the history of the beginning of Southern Rep, and we'll also talk about what this particular playwright author has done. And again, I want to just say that her output has been so voluminous that it's going to be difficult, very difficult, to get through all that she's done. But let's bring her into our studio tonight. Welcome, Rosary O'Neill. We want to thank you for being part of NOLA Theatre Talk tonight. Again, Rosary, I looked at the list of the plays that you sent me prior to during the broadcast tonight, and I mean, you've actually got them listed by sections, like Louisiana plays, short plays, vampire plays, which, right, I mean, some people are lucky to have one. You've got many. Then, of course, you've got some things like screenplays and things of that sort. And then, of course, some text. And we'll talk a little bit about some of your other books that you've done, too, because you've touched on a lot of different subjects. But Rosary, I just really, I like to first off start, because I'm not that familiar with your background in terms of where you hailed from, et cetera. So maybe you can fill me a little bit. You're right now, you're not in New Orleans, but you're living in New Orleans. So you're away during the pandemic. You're sheltering in place elsewhere. So right. The question I might ask is what do where do you call your hometown?
New Orleans. I'm born and bred from New Orleans. All my relatives in Metairie Cemetery and various other cemeteries throughout the city.
So that would be the Hartel family? Is that?
Yeah, the Hartel family, and the Nix family as well, too. Okay. My mother's side, she was Rosary Nix, yeah.
Right. And so that's the family who's been responsible for the library that we
Nix
know
Library, that's correct. Yeah.
And also, I believe they're very involved with the eyes, et cetera. I think there was someone involved with a Nix clinic, et cetera.
That was my uncle, and also Jay Nix, my cousin, owns Parkway Bakery and does a lot of work in the restaurant business. So my family is very deeply embedded in New Orleans.
So in your honor tonight, I put up a little bit of a background there, a little Degas, because you've had a little connection with Degas. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. But I just wanted to start off with that little piece there. But let me just ask, when you first got the, I guess you might say, insatiable need to write down things, and when did you first start getting involved with theater? What was your entry into that? Was that in high school?
High school at Sacred Heart, Academy of the Sacred Heart. I directed my first play, Little Women, starring Nell Nolan, years ago, and we almost had a fire in the auditorium because we used a smoke machine, which we weren't able to stop. So everyone had to sort of like leave the campus and go out on St. Charles Avenue. That was my first entree into directing. And of course, at that time, I also acted in the show, because I didn't know that you shouldn't be an actress and director. I guess I wanted all the glory, so to speak, and all the misery, of course, that came with that. But
So that was a case where there's smoke, there's fire. Almost was fire. Huh?
it was like, yeah. And I was very privileged to come from New Orleans and to come from a family that was really rooted here, and in a city that has so much mystery and so much good food and so much love and togetherness. And now I have still two wonderful daughters who live in the city and some grandchildren here. So I'm sort of back home. I still have a place in New York. I'm sort of I don't know if we call that. It's not really bi-coastal, Mississippi and the East Coast, but I want to die and be buried in New Orleans. That's how much I love it. Now this is where I'm going to be rooted. Yeah,
hopefully not for a long time. On the other end on that.
No. I know so many of my plays deal with that kind of crossover into another plane. Right now, I'm doing comedies on vampires because I just love the idea of farce and that whole world.
Yeah, I was very privileged, and we'll talk maybe a little bit about that, about the reluctant vampire, and talk a little bit. But now that's a finished work that you've done, or you still? I think you told me it was already completed, but they only did a reading of the first act or a portion of the first act, right?
Yeah, at Actors Studio, but it's now won an award and been invited to a big festival in New York City called the Winterfest, and it has a producer, and it will be done in New York, God willing, in January, at the Hudson Guild Theater in Chelsea. Yeah.
So you were doing plays, and Nell Nolan. I've never heard that name before. I mean, name dropper that you are.
Well, she's a fabulous actress too. Now.
Well, I've seen her do Love Letters, and of course she loves theater too. And maybe you helped imbue that sense of love of theater because she's at almost nearly, when we do have theater in New Orleans, she's almost at nearly every production, or at the Sanger. I always see her and her husband, of course.
Thank God, yeah.
And they're out and about. Robert Young. They I always say father knows best when he walks in the room. So essentially, I have to ask again. High school. What happened after that? Where'd you go?
Well, even before that, my parents had a big house on the Gulf of Mexico here in Waveland, Mississippi, and we would go over for the whole summer. And I was bored to death. So anybody came nearby the house, I would write a play and put them in the play. My parents would actually pay me not to have to go to the play, but we would come up with these dramas in the house. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So between 1986 and the time you graduated, I don't know how many years that was. How were you involved in theater before the founding of Southern Rep?
Well, I guess I talk about high school. I was an actress. I studied with Uta Hagen in New York. I got a PhD at UCLA in theater. But it seemed to me that the actress position was the hardest one because you had to. My father used to say, all that for temporary work. You work so hard, and you just get to work for 2 or 3 months, and then it's over. So I went from being an actress to deciding that I had to found a theater company in order to get work, in order to hire myself as a director or an actress. So that's why I did it. I really did it out of a commitment to get work for myself and also for other actors and artists to create an institution where there's so much talent in New Orleans where that talent could be somehow showcased.
All right. Well, you were already a doctorate holder at that time, I assume.
I had gotten actually a bachelor's at Newcomb College and then a master's at Tulane. I was delighted enough to get money to go to school. So I always took the awards that came with money. And then I got money to go to UCLA. So then I thought, well, why not? And I ended up with a PhD mainly because it was easier to get a PhD than it was to get a work in a movie.
Really? It might be. I guess it really depends though. But it's funny that you didn't gravitate towards film because UCLA has such a marvelous film school, correct?
Yes, but my training, I guess coming from New Orleans had always been kind of oral. The thing that I love about New Orleans is people tell such great stories. And film is really pretty visual. It's one picture after another, whereas plays are one story after another. So that's why.
It's just you're saying about you're wanting to make sure you had a lot of work for yourself. As a film director, you could ensure the fact that you would be employed and hire other people too. But that's another story.
That's another world. I'm delighted. I actually have a play of mine that has been I've written with my daughter Rory Schmidt, a Degas in New Orleans. Actually, it's called Degas: The Impressionist Years and Impressionable Years, and that's going to be produced as a film. So we've actually evolved into that. And my work my hope is to get work for artists locally in film and in television. Yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit about that because I know
Yeah.
you've got a couple of other things too that are in the pipeline, as it were. So let's first off, before we get back into Southern Rep, in your honor, you wanted to know how to make a Sazerac. I showed you prior to the show how to do that.
Thank you.
I don't normally have a Sazerac every night. I like one, but normally in the show I usually don't have as many Sazerac. I think this is the third Sazerac in as many shows that I've had for the entire run. So usually I don't have Sazeracs, but in your honor tonight I did that. So what are you having? What is that you're drinking tonight?
Coffee. Coffee is a writer's staple.
The writer's staple.
Right.
Okay. And you say right, as much as 8 to 10 hours a day.
I do try to do at least 8. Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty amazing amount of commitment. You know, when you think about that, that's you know, to get up and to be that conditioned, and also, you know, to put yourself through that all the time, no matter what.
Torture. Well, you know, I had a wonderful teacher, Ernest Gaines. I was very blessed to have a 5-year fellowship with him at USL, University of South Louisiana. And the first class he wrote on the, at that time was a blackboard, he said 5 to 6 hours. And he said, if you're not willing to write 5 to 6 hours a day, get out, because the competition is just too fierce. You're not going to get anywhere. So anyone in his course had to commit to doing that amount. And I guess I started out knowing that I had to be fearless about doing a lot of product. Mm-hmm.
Well, you turned out quite a bit. We'll get more to that later. So in 1986, you helped found. I assume you had a few other people who were in it with you. Who were some of the other people that you were founding Southern Rep with?
I was really the spear leader. At that time, I was, of course, married to someone else, Dick O'Neill, and he was my assistant. But in terms of I was the founding artistic director, and came in from California, really, with an idea that I could do it. I was young and daring, and no one told me I couldn't. So, you know, went ahead and did it. But there were a lot of wealthy people, wealthy in the terms of talent and time, who, you know, joined up forces and said, okay, can I help you? And I brought in artists from New York that I'd worked with at HB Studios. Joe Warfield was one, who had very high standards. And the idea was we were going to first start something that was the greatest thing in the world for Southern theater. And it happened. I figured if it wasn't successful, I would just leave town.
So did you start up the initial years? I know they ended up eventually at Canal Place. Were you involved in that?
I started up the theater for its first season, which was not in Canal Place. It was actually at the Bourbon Orleans Hotel in the French Quarter.
Wow.
And the idea was to do something totally New Orleans, and worked out a deal with the owner of the Bourbon Orleans that if I could get him free clients, because they were pretty empty at that time, that they would give me the ballroom, which they did, and a whole hallway of rooms for the actors. The actors were absolutely thrilled. And then I got LSU to bring in their technicians, and raised at that time $55,000 at a party at Antoine's. My Mara Louise Gus Nix, her brother, that was my cousin, helped me do that fundraiser. But it helped to have this tendrils in New Orleans, where I knew a lot of people. A lot of people were related and had a lot to be embarrassed about if I was a complete flop. My parents included left town at the fundraiser for Antoine's because they were afraid the whole family would be humiliated. They actually took a cruise and left town. They weren't going to be there. They said, oh my God, this is terrible. So, I mean, the odds were pretty much stacked against me, except that the odds in New Orleans for theater,
yeah,
it's very high. People love that here. Yeah.
Well, you know, I think that, you know, Le Petit had, at least certainly until Katrina and when they had to shut down because of the financial crisis, you know, they had a wonderful record as the longest continuously operating community theater in the country. And I know that there are probably a few people who probably taken up the banner and said, well, you know, they're not continuously operating, et cetera. But, you know, they still have quite a wonderful history. And you know, that's not to draw from anything away from them. You know, the fact is that people in New Orleans have always seemed to gravitate towards theater.
They love theater. People in New Orleans. Yeah. And there were a lot of people. I'm thinking of the Lupins, the Hymans, you know, who gave money, who are willing to take it there. I have to say the Jewish people basically supported me. They believed in cultural success. Yeah. So I say that straight out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And again, you were at the helm for how long at Southern Rep?
15 years. It'd like to kill me, but I loved it.
Okay. So and so I know that you sort of moved at that point. You moved out of town. Was that when you basically moved out, and then Ryan Roulette took over, or?
No, what helped me tremendously was that I had a full-time professorship at Loyola University, and Loyola was very supportive to me. So as an artistic director, I didn't need to make money from Southern Rep. All I needed to do was make quality and create opportunities. So was able in the summertime to create educational programs that employed actors and trained young high school students so that I could infuse an education and infuse money. But Loyola gave me an office, it gave me release time as a faculty member. It was a huge support to me in order to do this. Yeah.
So, well, when is it that Ryan took over? Do you remember when it
Yeah.
was?
Well, what happened? Let's see. I left. Took over right after me. Yeah. It was like
Okay.
in 2003. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, 2002, 2003, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
And
But
then, yeah.
I got a huge award. I got, and I've since had like 8 Fulbrights. I got this huge award to be a Fulbright senior drama professor. And simultaneously, both of my parents died, and I had a little bit of money, so I was able to leave my cushy job at Loyola, which nobody could believe I was leaving because it was such a fabulous place.
Yeah.
But then Katrina happened,
Yeah.
So I left for this New York and European experience, which was that's
And
why I left.
you keep that up. You've been going to Europe a lot.
I've had over the past, I'd say 20 years, 8 Fulbrights. I just had one in November to Germany. And basically, it's a terrific thing where they pay your room and board and give you some money to teach or to have your work done in Europe. And the great thing about it is that, people over there's so much art in like Paris and Germany and England that they really like actors. They like actors kind of like we like doctors here. They really admire it. It's an interesting experience to be surrounded by places where people really admire you being a creative person.
Well, you mentioned that. You mentioned
Yeah.
that. Who are these people here?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was when I was at the University of Bonn. The guy on the left actually played the lead in my Degas New Orleans play, and he's also a professor of English literature from Canada. And then next to him is Nora Wetzel, who's from New Orleans, who was my graduate assistant who went with me on that trip. She's and a wonderful, I don't know if you know anything about it, a culinary expert. So she brought a whole flavor to that to my courses. That's Sabine, who is the dean and head of the English Lit department. And then 2 other colleagues, graduate students, and then, of course, me at the end. So we're having a wonderful meal there discussing New Orleans, where everybody wants to go and be and do. Yeah.
So, and this is at the University of Bonn. Is this also University of Bonn?
Yeah, those are students from the University of Bonn. Yeah, studying American. Most of them had never studied American drama. The only person they know at all is Tennessee Williams, and most of them had never even seen the film of Tennessee Williams. They all fell in love with Marlon Brando, of course, in Streetcar Named Desire once they saw that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, again, you're taking the if you will, the New Orleans experience and taking it with you abroad and making people understand and love the city as much as we do who are natives
Right.
here. And that's a fabulous thing that you're doing in terms of outreach. But also it's important to make sure that people who are in the city basically have an opportunity to to fall in love with their own city too, to be able to see what we've got to offer here. Again, I know some of the things, as I said, that you have done historically for research, et cetera, on Louisiana. I know you mentioned the Degas play, and again, that was what Degas New Orleans, was it? What it said? The exact opposite is the exact title of the.
The movie is called Degas: The Impressionable
Right,
Years.
but the play itself.
Degas New Orleans.
Degas New Orleans, right?
Yeah, and I've actually written a book also on that. Yeah.
And again, that's one of your historical plays, and it's funny because you have the Louisiana family plays. I'm not quite sure how that differs. You've got things like Exposition Boulevard and the Louisiana Gentleman. I assume those are not historical. Those are fictional works. So you're putting them in as a Louisiana play in that regard, right?
Yeah, they're pretty much inspired by my family. As my sister said, your mom and daddy will only like them if they're dead. So now I feel comfortable because my darling parents are dead. So yeah, those are Louisiana plays. It's about life as I saw it, knew it, and the characters, many of whom you'll know in this marvelous New Orleans. Yeah.
One of the ones that I was privileged you were able to give me a copy of a few years ago was The Awakening of Kate Chopin, which takes
Right.
place not in New Orleans but in Louisiana,
Right.
and it takes place essentially on a plantation type of situation, a mansion we might call it,
Right.
and again, it does have I guess a little bit of historical basis to it, and you researched it right in terms of everything being accurate, right, in terms of
Yeah, well, it's totally accurate. The thing is, I had written this play on Edgar Degas, and he visited New Orleans, as you know, and scandalously for 6 months in
6 months. That was it. That was just
1872. But Kate Chopin lived here at
right.
the time, and she's known in Europe as a really, prolific, brilliant novelist. Many people don't know who she is. When I say Kate Chopin, they think, it's a wife of the composer Chopin or something. But anyway, she actually lived in 3 different houses in New Orleans, and then her husband, who had a cotton office next to the uncle of Edgar Degas, he went bankrupt, and Kate Chopin, moved to a plantation, and her husband went bankrupt, and then he died, and she had an affair with the man next door. So Louisiana, right?
Yeah.
And it was blah blah blah. But yes, it's based on her life, which was fairly scandalous, which is so great that people in New Orleans are kind of like down dirty because they give me great stories.
But now The Awakening of Kate Chopin,
Yeah.
I think we were looking to maybe do this as part of the plays that we're presenting on Monday nights in the NOLA Theatre Folk Facebook group. And again, broadcast on theatercriticism.com's Facebook page, etc., that we're doing tonight. But we decided there's a lot of characters. You have like 9 characters in that play, something like that.
9 in Degas, more in Kate Chopin, I think 4 or 5,
Yeah. So it was wow. Can we really do all that? And the question is because there's so many moving parts, and this particular platform allows us to have 6 people at a time, but and then four backstage ready to go. But again, we'd have to do a little bit of shifting, etc. And it could be done. It's not difficult, but it's just a little bit more of moving things around, etc. So we're looking at that. Again, if you're going to be making any comments tonight, feel free to do so. We remind you that you need to go to StreamYard.com if you're on the Facebook group for NOLA Theatre Folk, StreamYard.com/Facebook to give Facebook permission to put your comments up with your name. If not, it shows up as essentially, I'm not quite sure. It shows up sometimes without your name and sometimes with your name, but sometimes it'll just say Facebook user. So we want to give you yes. And for Darmy, who just asked, yes, this is theater. We are dealing with theater talk. And again, this is the NOLA Theatre Talk. Now, Rosary, this is you. This is Degas and you. This was taken. How long ago was this taken?
I think maybe 3 years ago. I had an award to Paris. I had a Fulbright in 2014, and then in 2016, so it'd be 4 years ago. My play Degas New Orleans was done at the Sorbonne University. Yeah, so I was there.
I mean, you look very serious, but I know you must have had a lot of fun doing that. That's an aspect of what you've done, and I'm hopeful that people will get to see that play. Now, have you actually presented it here in New Orleans yet?
I have presented in New Orleans in 2002 when I ran Southern Rep. Yeah, that long ago. Yeah, 18 years ago.
And where was it done? Was it done at the Canal Place? Yeah.
It was done at Canal Place, Southern Rep there. Yeah.
I wondered if it might lend itself to maybe being set somewhere, a historical place that maybe you might be able to, get permission to present it in. They've had a few places like that to enhance the experience of doing it.
That'd be great.
If you ever get a chance to do that, just a suggestion. So those of you who were able to be with us a few weeks ago, we brought this one out, Marilyn God, and this is the first one you said that you wanted me to do. And again, we had all the particulars that we tried to get down, and I thought we did really a wonderful job. Of course, Allison Logan carried up all the heavy lifting on that job, and Allison would have been with us tonight to congratulate you on the work, and for you, of course, to exchange words with her. I know you talked a little bit, prior and after via emails and things of that sort. But Allison, unfortunately, couldn't join us tonight. There's some family obligations that she had, so we appreciated her at least, wanting to tell you how much she appreciated being in there. And again, the other person involved in that, as you can see, is Rob Pavlovich. And Rob, unfortunately, has had a death in the family. Oh, no. So unfortunately, we want to wish him well with that too. And I would have asked him to join us tonight. But one of the things that we're sort of looking to in Marilyn and God, there's a part there where Marilyn talks out to her, I guess you might say, last boyfriend, and that was Clark Gable. And, right. And that brings up the very interesting aspect, because when Rob was, Bob was doing a fabulous Clark Gable impersonation, and that said to me, oh my goodness, he could do what we're hoping to do, which is coming up in another few weeks. And we've got it set right now for the third week in July, which would be July the 20th. And it's basically Clark Loves Carol. And originally you had written it up. The name of it was Plain Crazy, correct?
Plain Love. Originally.
Plain Love. Sorry, Plain Love.
Close.
And, yeah, and again, the idea being that PLANE, not PLAIN, because it was anything but plain, those two. And it may surprise people to learn a lot about Carole Lombard, because she died very early in 1942. And she was at that time not just the top moneymaker as an actress, but the top moneymaker in Hollywood. She outdid her own husband, who was called the King of Hollywood, and she was making more money than he was at that time. She was such a big star, and people don't realize what a big loss, unless you were living in America at the time, about how how important she was to the Hollywood scene, and how highly regarded she was and beloved she was as a figure. So to have the ability to do that. Now, I know that we don't know yet, because of the situation in Bob's family, as to whether or not he's going to be able to help us with that. We're hoping that he will, of course. But you've already been instrumental in helping us pick out our Carole Lombard, have you not?
I have, yes, yeah.
And that would be this lady, Kelly Lynn, right?
Kelly Lynn, yeah, fabulous actress, yeah.
And now Kelly, from what I understand, Kelly is going to be taking on the role, but she also had a role in a production that you are trying to sort of herald right now. You might say, and that's what, Garden District, is that
that's correct. Yeah, she plays a romantic lead in that as well. Yeah.
So and she's looking forward to this. So we don't yet have the Clark Gable nailed down yet, but we at least have our Carole Lombard, and we hope that she will be able to give birth, if you will, or birth that character, because it's a very if you've ever seen roles with Carole Lombard, she talked very fast. She had a wonderful patter, and she was a great humanitarian. That's the other thing I found out about her that was amazing. What drew you to her? I mean, as a historical figure, what was it? Was it Clark Gable and his romance with her, or was it her and her connection? Because obviously, she was also married to William Powell at one point, and he was a top actor in Hollywood at that time too.
I mean, you're always compelled. I'm always compelled by people who died young. She died at 33, in the height of her glory, and the man that most women in America were in love with, Clark Gable, was in love with her. So I think it was the fact that they did have a successful relationship that was destroyed. That was extremely interesting to me, in that he married women afterwards who looked like her. And what did she have that compelled him? And it was just fascinating to study her life. She was a daredevil, completely fearless, and an extremely hard worker. Even when she was in an accident, had surgery on her face, she refused to have drugs because she didn't want to have any kind of scar. I mean, she was just fierce. Yeah. But even so, the universe took her out. So we all live on the edge, even so. Yeah.
And I know, a lot of people don't ever notice it, but she had that scar right on her cheek.
Right.
And I know Montgomery Clift also suffered, that as well. And you did some work on some historical work on Montgomery Clift too, right?
2 plays on him, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you know, looks is such a big part of an actor's trade. I mean, even Aristotle said beauty was a major component of an actor, internal and external beauty. So you have to look at that, how a person deals with the loss of looks and also the devastation of an accident, what that can do for people. Yeah. Mhm.
And the other actor who I know of who was able to get by and come back, you know, in an amazing fashion, given the fact he was, you know, completely devastated and actually lost an eye, was Sammy Davis Jr. You know,
Amazing.
another,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Another one. I mean, the fearless amount of talent that pushes him through it's awe-inspiring. And I always like to write characters about people that I would like to have been like, kind of like live their dreamy experience. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
So one of the other characters that you have in your play, 2 plays that I know of, James Dean. You know,
Another one.
another one who died young.
24.
Yeah, and again, who with only 3 movies to his name, you know, that he had, still is a legend among legends. You did 2 different movies, rather plays, James Dean and the Devil, and James Dean and the Highway of Death. I assume the last one was meant to be his last play.
Well,
In a sense.
you know, I do different versions of the same thing in order to meet different needs. One is a one-man show with voices for the theater that just has a very limited budget, and the other one is a big cast show with the chorus and sound effects. So that's really the difference. And again, 24. You know, that time is one of the things we all have very little of. We run out of, but how people use it. Of course, I've been in the actor studio as a member about 10 years. And so you have to kind of be enamored of Jimmy Dean and Marilyn Monroe, whose picture is on the wall there, but was so terrified. She never ever got up and did a scene at the actor studio. She was scared to death. And Jimmy Dean, who auditioned, was the first and youngest member of the actor studio, who told Lee Strasberg when he gave him criticism, I'm not going to let you take the guts out of me, and walk right out. So these personalities have got to be fascinating to you, the way people deal with fear. One hiding and another one attacking, but both eliminated by the time they were 36. Gone. Mm-hmm.
So can you tell me a little about what drew you to the vampires? You know, what was it? Obviously, Anne Rice was also attracted to the theme of vampires in New Orleans. You know, what was it that made them seem like an ideal subject matter for you?
Well, you know, as an artist, you always go into something because you think somebody's going to do your play or do your movie or publish a book. You always do that. And my agent said, you know, paranormal is really, really in. Can't you write something about the paranormal? And I thought, well, I guess I could. And I like writing about famous New Orleans people. So my first play was actually Marie Laveau and the Vampire, because I really wanted to write about that famous woman. But after I showed it to my agent, she said, oh, I can't sell this. I need a vampire in the kitchen. I need a vampire, you know, in a domestic comedy. I thought, oh, no. So then I thought, well, I took another course and they said, well, why don't you try to make it personal? And so I wrote a new vampire play, but everybody said it's funny. I didn't even know I was funny. I thought, well, funny is good. So out of the interest in the people in the workshop, HB Studios, and then Actor Studio, I thought, yeah, people are really interested in vampires and voodoo. You see, we're from New Orleans. We don't know this because we're so used to it here. But people, you know, in New York, in the workshops, they're like, oh, this is fascinating. I said, really? Okay. So also, it's been kind of a sad time in terms of the way the world is. So I feel a need as a writer to make people laugh. I mean, you can't write for laughter, but you can write about people who are highly frustrated, and that's usually funny.
Now, The Reluctant Vampire is a funny piece, is it not?
Yeah. And it's going to be, it's basically about a guy who in the 19th century doesn't want to be a vampire and doesn't want to suck blood and is stuck in St. Louis Cemetery and is trying to get out and comes and runs into Marie Laveau and is told he has to kill her because she's a priest with 9 times as much power in her blood as a normal human. And so he's even more terrified until he falls in love with her. So it's kind of a romp in the St. Louis Cemetery. Yeah.
Well, and where else would you want to romp there? So again, you've not done musicals. You've stayed away from that. You
I have done a musical.
Have you?
Mm-hmm.
Which one?
What do you think? Degas in New Orleans was put to music,
Okay.
Made into a musical and done at Bard College in New York, and then at the Arthur Seeland Theater in Manhattan. Yeah, and I felt it was really wonderful. If I could create music, I'd write musicals for everything. I just love music.
So Marie Laveau and the Vampire was also a musical.
I've written it as a musical, but it hasn't been done. But Degas in New Orleans was done as a musical. Yeah.
And so I guess there's not much that you haven't done in terms of the type of genre of plays and musicals and things that we're used to in New Orleans and seeing. You've got one man shows, I guess, or one woman shows, depending. It seems like you've got the whole spectrum there, and I'm not quite sure we can come up with much of anything else, to make life interesting for you. But you are trying now to do the screenplays. I know that you've got you did the screenplay of Degas, and now Garden District, the TV series. I know Brian Batt was involved with that.
Yeah, he still is. He's involved with one of the leads in that series.
Now, was your daughter involved with that too? One of your daughters?
Both my daughters. One of the daughters done research on the script, Rory Schmidt, and then another daughter, Rochelle O'Brien, has been involved as one of the producers. Yeah, about 7 people involved with producing that series, which is quite exciting. Yeah,
and I gotta see if I have the. I thought I had a nice picture. I'm trying to remember where it was. That might be. I'm trying to see if that's the right one, because I know you sent me a picture. Yeah, no, you sent me a picture of I think your daughter. She has the red hair, right?
Yeah, she was in. Yeah, that's Rochelle O'Brien. She was in Paris with me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was trying to. I know I gotta find that picture, but basically, you were holding up one of your books as well as the TV series. But to get back to the TV series before we get to that, you're right in the process of sort of promoting it, and all of a sudden we have a pandemic.
Yeah, so
what do you do?
We're basically on hold right now.
Yeah.
I think the film business is pretty much on hold. The hope is that it will all come back. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but is it going to be shot in New Orleans, or is it just going to be set in New Orleans?
Oh, it's hopefully going to definitely be shot in New Orleans. It's all about New Orleans characters, so that would be sure to be shot here. The director, Oli Sassoon, is from New Orleans. The actors, many of the actors, all the actors involved with it now are from New Orleans, including Barrett O'Brien and Janet Shea, and of course you met Kelly Lynn and Brian Batt. It's just fun to work with all these intensely creative people who know New Orleans so deeply and can come up with all the small intricacies of character. And we shot a 20-minute what they call a sizzle, which is basically what we used to say was a trailer to sell the feature with. So hopefully when things soften up a little bit, we'll start to shoot that.
The idea of a sizzle, though, is to attract producers to invest, or to attract studio executives to give the green light and money to advance the series.
Both. It's just we're not excluding anybody who's interested. Yeah, right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, again, not necessarily wanting to give you any bad luck, so I won't say good luck, but I will say break legs. Hopefully that does.
Legs.
Yeah, hopefully that it'll take. Obviously we're in some pretty interesting times right now that require maybe a little bit more patience for this to actually happen. But I would love to see Brian back in another series. Mad Men was great, but it wasn't set in New Orleans, and so this would be an opportunity for him to be seen in a New Orleans setting, which would be great. Plus all those other people that you mentioned. So. I guess it's about that time where we need to get into some of your other writings. First off, you're about to bring out, I think, your more recent book on Carnival. Is that what you had in your hand there?
No, this was a voodoo book that I wrote.
The voodoo book, okay.
With my daughter, Rory Schmidt. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure which one you had there because I couldn't see. But all right, so now you obviously had gotten involved in the occult, in terms of the Reluctant Vampire and of course Marie Laveau. So how does that lead you to get involved with voodoo? Is it your research on Marie Laveau that did that, or what?
Well, I like to write about famous people because I think that film is a way of kind of capturing history. So I did write Marie Laveau and the Vampire. But again, I got a Fulbright to go to Paris and write this because the people in France were interested in New Orleans and vampires and Marie Laveau. So it started with that. And then my daughter, who's on the faculty at USC, she said, I think I can pitch a voodoo book to Arcadia Press, who published my book on Carnival. And they were extremely interested. I mean, I didn't know anything about voodoo. But the book is written from the point of view of a person who comes in and asks questions, like an outsider. Tell me what it is. The voodoo cult in New Orleans, enormous group of prayerful people with tremendous history in the city. So I've been very moved to find and learn about voodoo, and also about Marie Laveau, who was really kind of a heroine before her time.
What's the one thing that you learned in doing your research on voodoo that surprised you?
That there's no, unlike Judaism and Catholicism, Christianity, there's no book. That every voodoo group is different. It's completely a religion, if you will, that's passed down orally. There's no text, and one group may differ from another. That was amazing to me, how a religion could be passed down verbally, and that it was founded by Black women who were poor, basically, and because of the power of these prayerful people, it has mushroomed and grown, and that's amazing. One of the leaders today in New Orleans is a brilliant Jewish PhD, so it's inclusive of everyone, and yet it's still fairly hidden because it's completely oral. You can't really read books on it. I have written some, so maybe you can see those, but it's
right.
anonymous, yeah.
Right. Well, and
again, it's New Orleans. It's New Orleans, what we have here.
And it was a very important part of New Orleans history, was it not? In terms of Marie Laveau, the most famous. But again, I wonder sometimes if Marie Laveau wasn't also somewhat like Madame Biguet, where there was a Madame Biguet and there was another Madame Biguet, and one took over the identity of the other. That they say that Marie Laveau's daughter may have assumed the identity of her mother because she didn't want to let the power go away, and so all of a sudden, like in The Princess Bride, the Dread Pirate Roberts, right? That's there's never really one Dread Pirate Roberts. There's one who takes on the identity, and then he passes it on to somebody else, and he becomes the Dread Pirate Roberts.
That's right. And
then he moves off to the side, and all of a sudden, the other guy's in charge. So I wonder if that's the case. Did you find out anything in your research as to whether or not Marie Laveau's daughter did indeed take over her mom's identity?
Well, there are different points of view, but generally people think that there was a Marie Laveau 1 and a Marie Laveau 2, which was one of her, I think, 9 children. She had only 2 survived. So when you think that she prayed in the cemeteries because she buried, 9 children, I mean, it was just extraordinary. And one of the 2 children, women that survived, yes, took over her role.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most people believe that, but again, it's all passed down.
But I remember when Poppy Tooker was talking about Madame Biguet. She said this was the original Madame Biguet, and then there was another lady who took over. And again, they all like that identity, and it works out great for them. As they go, I don't know anybody who wants to be me second time around. I don't think there's anybody raising their hand just yet. Rosary, let me get to your other book that you had there. I hope nearby on Carnival.
Now, that came out first, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, notwithstanding, I think any other subject, I think New Orleans has a love affair with Carnival, Mardi Gras, whatever you want to call the culture that's inbred, that cannot really be described. When people ask me why it is, in February that I can't leave the town, and I tell them I'm narrating Mardi Gras balls, they go, "What's that all about?" When October rolls around and I can't leave town because they're coronation balls where the kings and the queens are being named by the different organizations, and people say, what do you mean you can't leave? I can't leave. These are things that I can't do. So again, did you have any history with Carnival in terms of in your family, any of your members of your family involved in any clubs, crews, etc.?
Okay, so my parents were very much involved. My father was a member of 7 different organizations, and he was king of 3. My mother had been queen, I think, of 2 or 3. My sister was queen of 2. Yeah, they were very involved in Carnival. I was a maid in 5 different organizations. Yeah.
So were they the society balls, or were they?
There was society balls. The thing for me was my father used to take us to the old auditorium unit. They set up the king and queen, the beautiful stage and everything. And I was horrified to find that I couldn't be part of the stage set. I could only be a woman in the audience waiting to be asked to dance. That was such a disappointment to me. And that's kind of launched me into wanting to go into theater, because you can't live in New Orleans and not want to be in a parade or float on the stage. It's just impossible.
Yeah, but all you had to do was join a ladies' crew.
They weren't. Yeah, I know, but
Iris and Venus, I can tell you that for a fact. The ladies enjoyed themselves prior to some of these other, more recent iterations.
But yeah, you're right. I could have done that, but at that time it was pretty much a male-dominated situation. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, again,
no longer.
You mentioned your dad was king of three. Are they three that we would recognize? Or can you say? Is it still?
I don't mind saying Osiris and I think you MC for that. Prophets of Persia and I think Nereus.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Those are all.
No, it's mystery. Yeah, mystery. Yeah.
Yeah. They're all well known. What we call society balls, and again, anybody who's listening and doesn't understand.
Right. Yeah.
There are parading organizations, and then there are some that are just essentially small knit groups who basically are not looking to have a lot of people come into their balls, and so they basically are a little bit more close knit than others. Now, some of the more modern super crews, they have 2,500, 3,000 people.
Yes,
I mean, they're not interested in a ball necessarily. They're interested in an extravaganza.
Right.
They're people at Endymion, people at Orpheus. They put on a big show. They're not really interested in a small ball that allows them to announce their daughters, etc., or have their
right.
And that's what that's really more about. And it's really sort of a close knit thing. But yeah, again, not a whole lot of people are looking to get into that either, because
it's
yeah. But again, so that's your connection. Tell us a little bit about the actual writing of that. How long did that take?
The writing of this book took about 7 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's a lot of time.
I know. You never think it's going. Anytime you write something historical, even a play like Marilyn God took 3 years. They take a lot of time because you have to try to get at least a sense of the facts right. And when you write a book on Carnival, it's kind of like a record, isn't it? Yeah. So it took us about 7 years.
So what's the book? How is it for people who are interested in finding a little bit more about it? What's the basic premise of the book? Is it a historical look at Carnival, or how do you have it segmented in terms of?
It's kind of this is a historical look at Carnival from its beginnings to approximately 1970, to almost the birth of the Super Cruise. In other words, the old way Carnival was done in the city before the whole celebrity extravaganza thing happened. So yeah, and I had about 100 interviews with different people who are very intimately involved with everything from black Zulu parades to the maskers who ride on wrecks, and they all helped me anonymously so I could try to figure out how this thing evolved. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what was again one of the more interesting pieces that you found out about that you had not known about when you first started tackling this subject?
Wow. How some people were excluded based on name, race, color, religion. And it changed with the Super Cruise. It's actually changed for the better. But that was a shock to me to see this inbred way that people controlled other people's hearts. That was a surprise to me. Yes.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. No, I mean, in terms of our history of Carnival, I mean, it reflects in many ways the history of the city, and there were people who were free and people who were not free early on, and Carnival came about. Organized Carnival. We remember 1857 with the organization of the Mystic Crew of Comus, of course, and of course 1872 wrecks that followed, etc. But there was a period of time. 1857 is before the Civil War, and obviously after the Civil War was and really in the middle of Reconstruction, maybe towards the end of Reconstruction, but again, it was a period of time there where New Orleans was getting out from the past of its connection to slavery and what have you. So
Right.
it meant a new beginning in many ways, and in many ways it meant a continuation of what had been before, and some of it bad, and we recognize that. But at some point, Carnival became democratized, I'd almost say.
It did, and
You know?
that's the thrill of it. Yeah, it became democratized. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fantastic. Like you said, women's groups. You could be in many women's groups now. You see
Yeah,
that?
and again, a lot of the Super Cruise Orpheus, they were founded, in a situation, men, women, LGBTQ, etc. There were no holds barred in terms of everybody was welcome to join in, and that was part of their their mission statement, as it were, when they were founded, and they wanted to make sure that everybody felt that they were included and not excluded, and that aspect of Carnival was not being continued, as it were. Yeah, in terms of what we are looking at now, I mean, you helped shape Southern Rep, and obviously now May Hayes is the producing artistic director. Ryan Roulette had done it for a few years, and she's taken on. They've got pretty challenging times right now, with their finances, etc. And it's not something that's a secret. Having been the person who was responsible for getting them started, how does that make you feel now, in terms of your connection to them?
Well, I'm glad I'm not running the theater now, because it's a big challenge to raise money, I think. But I applaud their bravery. I applaud May Hayes for staying on the helm throughout Katrina, for bringing the theater to a new home, and to trying to meet the challenges. As I said, my big benefactor was Loyola University. That's allowed me to steer that ship for 15 years. So,
and as you said, it was because you were making, your living from Loyola. You didn't have to worry about
yes, and
salary. Yeah,
and I had students. You see, I had students that I was mentoring. That like we have interns here. I had a team of people behind me and a support structure. I think it's very difficult for theaters when you don't have an alignment with some kind of structure, either political or educational, that supports you, because it's a huge challenge to raise money to do theater. And I think it's great just to keep the doors open is a great thing.
Well, and again, I think that they're doing a fabulous job. It's just so difficult, and now with the pandemic and the doors shuttered, they were going to be having the play Chemin de Bayou back in May, and of course that's been postponed. And that was about New Orleans and about the culture of I guess the Cajun culture as well. I'm not quite sure. I didn't get to see all of it or know anything about it yet, but I was looking forward to seeing that. Again, I'm always interested in seeing new works, and that's one of the things that's distinguished Southern Rep from the other places, at that National New Play Network that they have, the rolling plays that they've had. They've had plays like Lisa D'Amour's Detroit.
That was great.
We saw Airline Highway that they did, and again, plays that might have played in New York, and for the first time here in New Orleans, we get to see them. Very important plays. I remember I saw in Cleveland Sarah Rule's The Clean House, and Southern Rep was the first theater to bring it here in New Orleans.
Wow, I know. Great.
And a wonderful play that it was. I have to say that when they're able to do some work like that, it's really wonderful, and they do a great job, and not to say that the other theaters don't do, they all have their own particular aspects, but Southern Rep has always been the one that's done the new plays more than others, and I just applaud them for their efforts, and I hope that obviously all of the production companies that they weather this storm, because it's very difficult. I know JKS right now is mounting a drive to try to get some money, because a lot of the money that they got, they got through the state, and a lot of that money that the state was dependent upon, like oil and gas revenue, has dried up. So they're not exactly have the the legislature throwing money at them.
Right.
Not that they ever had money being thrown at them, as Dennis would say, but they're all weathering this financial crisis as well as the pandemic, and it's sort of a double whammy. And I really feel sorry for all the people who are trying to do what they normally do under, what we'd say regular situation.
All different.
And then now this new normal that we have that's put us into a situation where we've had to double intensify our efforts to raise money and to try to get people to continue to not only just be financially making a commitment, but also to be interested in actually being part of the process, maybe being on a board or
Right.
getting a season subscription. What else do we have in the future for you besides Garden District? What you're working 8 to 10 hours a day. What do you have that you want to do that you haven't done yet? Because it seems like you've done an awful lot.
Well, I'm working on another vampire play that's called The Naughty Vampire. That's because there's been so much that interested in New Orleans vampires. That's my next one I'm working on right now in the Herbert Burggrove Studios. The great thing about Zoom is that you and I are together, and all these people in New Orleans can chime in. It's just there's going to be tremendous possibilities for all creative people because of this. So I'm working on that right now. Reluctant Vampire is now moving into Naughty Vampire. I'm working on just finishing up a novella called Inside the Rain. Yeah, I'm in a screenplay workshop at Columbia right now. So there's all kind of possibilities for people because even though we can't be together physically, we can be together spiritually, and our hearts are together. Yeah.
And if somebody was looking at the year 2020 right now,
Right.
20 years in the future and go back, I think one of the things that they're going to look at, first off is Black Lives Matter and all that's going on with that.
Right.
And there's going to be, I get this feeling of, this big movement towards increasing the opportunities for people of color to take part in plays, and for people to lose a lot of the racist attitudes. I myself have been trying to familiarize myself with pieces like the White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, and reading about the aspects of behavior that people are exhibiting that you don't realize perhaps you're guilty of. And
it's about needing work. Like Reluctant Vampire, it's 3 characters, two Black women, 1 white man. Artists need to work. They need parts. People want to play Marie Laveau. People want to play Jimmy Dean. We got to create the work. When I ran Southern Rep, at least 1/4 of all productions was a Black production. We have to create the opportunity. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm hoping that what we're witnessing is a I don't want to say a revolution, but at least that there's some sort of a new approach that people now recognize that's bad behavior.
Yeah,
and we need to be able to move on from there. And you know what? One of the things is that if you're guilty of something and you recognize it, and you change your behavior, perhaps you won't repeat it again. There are people who are going to continue to repeat it, and they may need to be reminded. Remember when we said you were doing that, you're doing it again.
Right.
But I think eventually people will get it. And you know what? One of the things that struck me most about what Robin DiAngelo was talking about when she found out that she was guilty of a mea culpa, if you will, in calling out somebody for some bad behavior and not realizing what she was doing in the process. The person came up and asked her, do you want future criticism when you do this again? Because there's no question she was going to do it again. Do you want it public or private? And she said, I want it public.
Wow.
That's a departure for many people. And I kind of feel like I'd like to be told, if I do it maybe publicly too. Of course, if you want to say it privately first before you go public with it, I wouldn't mind to at least know what's going to be happening. But by the same token, I think it's important for us to be able to correct those past indiscretions and maybe move on from there and create a positive place for people to work and a great environment. Rosary, you have done a wonderful job of being on with me for an entire hour.
It's fun.
We talked about you. We talked about your work. We talked about your past and hopefully your future. But again, I'm delighted to count you as a friend. I'm delighted to know that you're contributing still. and that we can count on you for contributing more theater, providing us more parts for more actors.
That's
and,
it.
and of course, let's just hope and pray that we get through this pandemic and move on the other side of it, and that hopefully people will enjoy what you have to say for many, many, many years to come, and that we will be able to enjoy these older works that you've done. I am looking forward to seeing Clark Love's
Carol.
Carol. I hope that it comes off as well as it can be expected to be. And again, I hope that people will enjoy seeing that again. That's going to be on July the 20th. We'll have again Donald Lewis coming up next Friday. Coming up, the versatile actor will be on this Friday, and then next week the Actors Equity Liaison Committee will be in. And I believe, if I remember everybody correctly, John Bostic, Meredith Long, Sherry Marina, and Sean Patterson. We're looking forward to that. Thank you for being with us, Rosary. For NOLA Theatre Talk, this has been Alan Smason. And again, I want to thank you all for being with me tonight. Take care and have yourself a wonderful night. And I'll see you at the theater.